Two Chairs No Waiting, episode number 406, Bernard Fox Remembered. Two Chairs No Waiting is brought to you each week by the fine folks over at WeaversDepartmentStore.com. Drop by over at Weavers and pick up some of the great Mayberry items they've got there. You got the Mayberry Trivia book by Scott Hopkins. Great book, 1,500 questions. You would love it. Also got Mayberry 101. Wow, is that full of information? We'll be talking about some of that tonight. And the Andy Griffith Show book. If you're into books, head over to WeaversDepartmentStore.com and check them out. Two Chairs No Waiting is also brought to you by donations from listeners just like you. Hey, everybody, I want to thank you for your support of the show. Thank you for being here. I want to thank all our patrons who donate by every episode. So you can join in on doing that too. If you'd like to support Two Chairs, you can head over to our Patreon side. If you just go to twochairsnowaiting.com and click on the link there, it'll take you right to it. And you can donate and help keep the show going. So tonight we're going to be talking about, or today, and whenever you're listening to it, Bernard Fox. Well, Bernard Fox, as we all know, was Malcolm Merriweather on the Andy Griffith Show. We all know who Malcolm was, right? So, you know, it's the Englishster. He's an Englishster. Ernest T wanted to fight him in one of the episodes. But Bernard was a great guy, and here I was doing some research because he recently passed away. You may not know this. He was born on May 11th, 1927, and he passed away December the 14th, 2016. His name was actually Bernard Lawson, so he was related to Floyd. Who knew that? But he was better known, of course, as Bernard Fox. He was Welsh, and he's remembered honestly best by most people as Dr. Bombay on Bewitched. Everybody remembers that. And he was also on Hogan's Heroes. He was on the Titanic movie. He was in The Mummy, the movies that came out not too long ago, the Mummies. Well, not too long ago. 1999 is when it was. But Bernard, he appeared in those. Of course, he was on the Andy Griffith Show, as I said, as Malcolm Merriweather. And he had been at several Mayberry events, and I was fortunate enough to be able to meet him and sit around and listen to him tell stories. So one of those instances was back in, what year was it? Let's see here. It was in 1998. 1998 is June the 26th is when this interview was done. Now, this was done on a cassette recorder, so the sound's not going to be quite as good as we're used to here on the podcast, but I know you're going to enjoy it as we get to hear from Bernard in his own voice. Now, this is only a fairly short interview, and it was originally aired here on the podcast back on episode number 19, but I felt like it's probably been long enough, and some of you may have forgotten this interview. I know I had. So let's go and hear from Bernard. So Bernard, take it away.
Mr. Fox, you were on 2 episodes of the Andy Griffith Show?
3.
3? That's right, 3, the color episode. How did you enjoy your time that you spent on the set? I realize it was a very small amount of time, but did you enjoy it?
Actually, it was very nice. It was one of the first shows I did in the United States, and I've been here a few months, and, beginning to get worried about work.
You shouldn't be too interested in what he has to say.
And my friend Howie Morris said, I will give you a job anytime. And Harvey Bullock wrote this script for the Andy Griffith Show, and it was my first show. And we sat at home in our little one-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles, which I believe cost us all of $230 a month. And I was wondering where the next job's coming from. And we watched that particular Andy Griffith Show, and when it finished, the phone rang. And it was Andy Griffith. And he was saying, Bernard, that's got to be one of the best shows we ever did. And that just gave me a great feeling. And I'm not sure if he said we'll do more, but we did. And that really helped in those early days when I just arrived in America.
And on the show, you drew faces on the egg and made the tree out of a newspaper. Was that your idea, or was that already written?
My idea, yes. Harvey Bullock asked me if I could play an instrument, and I said no. And I said I can knock out a tune on a penny whistle, and that didn't look too promising, and I thought that the job's going out of the window, you know, and suddenly remembered that I could do this paper magic. So he said, what is that? And I told him about it, and we did it. He said, basically what he wanted was something for Opie to go, oh wow, you know, that kind of thing, which of course it worked very well.
That's great. And you appeared on Bewitched, of course. A lot of people will remember you even as Dr. Bombay, of course.
Yeah.
And Hogan's Heroes, you were on there. And yeah, I remember you especially from Bewitched, and because you were on there so often, and that character was so strong character, I suppose.
Well, I've been very lucky in the characters I've played, more or less. Over the years, they've all been strong. I mean, this, the character in Titanic wasn't exactly strong, but at least it was it was sympathetic and warm towards Kate Winslet. Now this character I just finished in Morocco, and very strong.
And what was the name of that movie?
I just finished a very strong character in Morocco.
That's
yes.
right.
Did you? Yes.
That's right.
And you hated it.
And the director was wonderful.
Yeah?
He kept saying, I won't hurt you, but...
Is that the king of the world?
He knew Jim Cameron. I just worked with Cameron, so he kept saying, I won't hurt you, Bernard, I won't hurt you.
Oh, God.
And what was
Listen,
the name?
10 o'clock tomorrow morning, okay?
All right.
10 o'clock.
And what was the name of that movie that you just finished in Morocco?
It's called The Mummy. And it's a cross between the old Mummy with Boris Karloff and like a modern, exciting adventure film. They've got a lot of special effects. And I'm a World War I pilot left over. All my buddies have died. And I end up flying the people that are the two guys that are searching for the tomb. I fly them on the wings of my fighter plane.
Wow. Is there any question in particular that people tend to ask you often about the Andy Griffith Show, or
Not so much,
any part in
no,
particular?
it's funny that Andy Griffith Show has got such a strong following, and much stronger following than Bewitched. But I do get recognized more for Bewitched, even in the desert in Morocco.
Oh, really?
Yes.
People recognize Dr. Bombay out there. Well, I know you also collect vaudeville routines from previous times I've met you. What got you started doing that exactly?
We did we tried to run a British Victorian music hall in Santa Monica, and we ran from '73 until '78. And we had to learn a lot of the songs of the gay 90s, you know. And I got interested in it. And then I discovered my grandmother, on my mother's side, had been a music hall performer in England. And she did what they call what do they call it? But basically what it was that she had her own face and a dress on the front and a false face on the back. And it was a transformation dance, you know. She'd jig about and then turn around, and it was another person jigging about. So that more, I think it's in the blood, really.
When I've seen you before perform up in Michigan at Grand Rapids, that you were so funny up there. I enjoyed that so much. We got to sit around. I was privileged enough to be able to sit around with you when you weren't performing and just listen to you tell stories.
Yeah.
And it was really enjoyable.
You keep telling me to get it down on paper, and I haven't bothered yet. Well, you've got this one on.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for it. And if there's anything else you'd like to say, you feel welcome to go ahead and say it. But if not, I just want to thank you for your time. And,
thank you.
And I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good evening.
All right. So they were about to, as you heard, Howard Morris, Ernest T. Bass, he kept interrupting the interview because he was wanting to arrange for them to go out and eat dinner. That's what they were trying to figure out. And then arrange also when they were going to come back the next morning. So that's what he was talking about. And The Mummy was the Brendan Fraser movie that came out back in 1999. He was the airplane pilot, as he mentioned. And he was, they filmed that out in the desert of Morocco. And he got to, you know, he had set up a little tent out there. He was out in the desert, but he had his phonograph and everything. I remember the character well. Anyway, Bernard was super about all this stuff. Just being able to talk with him. He sat around with us after the shows and would tell stories. And as I mentioned in that interview, actually, I mentioned he collected vaudeville routines, and because of him, you know, I've got some books on vaudeville humor, vaudeville stuff, because a lot of the stuff that we do as a Mayberry tribute artist, if you ever get to see us at Mayberry Days or anything, is inspired a lot by old vaudeville routines, that kind of activity, that kind of fun. So let me tell you a little bit about this. Now, some of this information I'm going to get here is from Mayberry 101. It's behind the scenes of a classic TV. This is by Neil Brower. So if you don't have this, head over to Weavers and get you a copy. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. This is the section about Andy's English valet. I'm not going to read this to you because it's a lot of stuff, but there's a few quotes in here that I wanted to read. This one's from Harvey Bullock. He was one of the writers. He actually wrote the Andy's English valet. He said, Bernard Fox brought Malcolm Merriweather to life in his own gifted fashion. I can't imagine another performer in the role. That was Harvey Bullock, the writer. So what had happened was Ray Allen, that's Harvey's partner in writing. He had been over in London writing a television series over there for them that Bernard was in. And as such, he became familiar with Bernard. And when he was instrumental in talking Bernard into coming back to the United States, or coming over to the United States. Well, that and a young lady who Bernard later married, her name was Jackie, that the two of them Ray Allen and Jackie kind of talked him into coming back to coming over to the United States. And when he came over, they actually wrote him into a show. It said, this is Harvey talking. He says, back in California, Ray and I were writing the Danny Thomas Show. And we convinced Danny to use Bernie, that's what he called Bernard, and then wrote an episode for him called Andy's English Friend in August 1962. Bernie was great playing the part of a totally fouled up waiter at Danny's nightclub. And so then Bernie did a follow-up episode of the same character in an episode called Danny's Girl Shy episode. It was later that year. And Harvey said, I recall Danny admiring Bernie's gifts. He once said, quote, the man is sprinkled with stardust. So he's talking about Bernard. Anyway, Bernard actually says, evidently I caused something of a sensation because I was asked to do a pilot for a series. So as part of that character that he had done on the Danny Thomas Show, they almost made a series for that character to play the roles that he played. Well, that didn't work out, and it didn't make it. But basically, he ended up being able to get on the Andy Griffith Show, and Bernard says, at the script reading, he kind of felt like it wasn't going to work the way they'd done the character. He said, but happily for me, the Andy Griffith Show was shooting on the same lot, and they were anxious to utilize my talent. So they began the episode there of Andy's English Ballet that Harvey wrote, and they were able to work Bernard. I can't call him Bernie, but that's what Harvey's calling him in this write-up here. He says, this is kind of interesting. He was talking about the language and stuff that they used and where this came from. Let me quote this to you. This is from Harvey. Let's see. Harvey talks about here that he came up with the name of, in a script reading, when I was asked where Malcolm might have come from, I remembered the name of a village in Derbyshire, I'm sure I said that wrong, called Eckmondwike, which was always turning up Boy Scout magazines as having particularly inept troop of scouts, said Bernard. And Harvey says, I think I devised the name Malcolm Merriweather, but I know Bernie added immensely to the script. That's what Harvey said. He says, I remembered such colorful terms such as bubble and squeak, which I think is corned beef and cabbage, and a few others from my London writing venture. But Bernie came up with almost all the Englishisms, he said. So I thought this is really interesting stuff. I remember this. I've read this book before, but I went back and reread some of these things. Let's see. I wanted to tell you, Bernard was the one who had the idea. He says another Bernard idea, one of his ideas was Malcolm drawing the face on Opie's egg. The ideal resulted in an interesting response from the tag's sponsor, General Foods, and the manufacturer of Sanka coffee and Post cereals. And this is Bernard talking. He says, I'd been reading how American sponsors interfered with the shows. You couldn't have a person commit suicide, for instance, with a gas stove if the sponsor was a gas company, said Bernard. So I mentioned to the prop man, Reggie Smith, that I was surprised that nobody had complained about having a boiled egg on the show. Reggie Smith laughed and said, are you kidding? He then pulled back and opened his desk drawer that held a sack of letters detailing what had to be in evidence on the table around the egg. All General Foods products had to be all around the egg, so that if you see the egg, you're going to see all the Post cereal or whatever General Food stuff around it. I thought that was interesting. So I'm not going to read this whole thing. I definitely encourage you to get this book, Mayberry 101 by Neil Brower. You can get it at Weaver's, you can get it at other places, but shop at Weaver's and support the show. I'm going to read the end of this because I thought he talked about this in this we just heard. He said, Bernard Fox, he said this, I just finished watching myself on the Andy Griffith Show. He said, at that time, I was very, very new to Hollywood. There was little money in the bank and no sign of immediate work. So I was sitting there thinking that the future looked, fairly bleak when the phone rang. It was Andy, full of praise for my work. He mentioned that it was one of the best shows they have ever done and that they were definitely going to have to do more. My spirits soared. So that's Bernard Fox. Ladies and gentlemen, the world lost a pretty amazing guy back on December the 14th. And we will remember Bernard with smiles and amazing, great memories of not only Malcolm Merriweather, but also of Dr. Bombay, Colonel Crittenden from Hogan's Heroes. There's just so many. He played so many parts. He was on Dick Van Dyke. He was on Danny Thomas. He was on so many shows back in the 60s, especially. And he will always be remembered. He was so gracious every time I ever met him. And it's a sad day that we lost him. But it's a sad day, but the memories will always keep a smile on my face. All right. So folks, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever met Bernard? I'd love to hear what you had to say. Did he ever talk to you? Did you ever get an autograph? Did you get an egg with a face on it? I have one behind me somewhere. Folks, I'd love to hear from you. Give me a call at 888-684-8415. Let me hear your thoughts. You can also email me at floyd@imayberry.com or just drop by twocairsnowaiting.com and leave a comment there. Folks, until next time, I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you here on Two Chairs No Waiting.